And good morning once again to Bloomberg Opinion Editorial Board Conversations. I'm your host, Robert George, and with me today is my esteemed colleague, Nisid Hajari. And Nisid, you were the main composer of a rather troubling editorial this week, How the U.S. Should Deter China's Nuclear Ambitions. It seems that the Chinese are amping up on the nuclear side. There's quite talk of doomsday missiles and the like. So could you walk us through as to where China has been on the nuclear side and where it's going and what we should be worried about?
Sure. Morning, Robert. So traditionally, China's maintained a very small nuclear deterrent. In 2019, the Pentagon estimated the numbers at something in the low 200s in terms of the number of warheads. But in the last few months, there have been reports coming out into the open source press. Over the summer, satellite images showed what appeared to be 2, possibly 3 new fields of ICBM silos in different parts of China, and which would have, if they were all filled with nuclear-armed ICBMs, would greatly increase China's nuclear arsenal. And then the Financial Times reported that over the summer, China conducted 2 tests of what they described as a hypersonic glide vehicle. And without getting too technical about it, the idea was that they launched this vehicle on a rocket into orbit. It didn't complete a full orbit of the Earth, but before it did, it detached the glide vehicle, which then came down at hypersonic speeds towards its target. It missed its target by 24 miles or something, but the idea is that this kind of vehicle would be able to evade existing U.S. missile defenses. And so in that sense, even if the technology wasn't necessarily new, I mean, it's the same technology that we use for the space shuttle, the capabilities are new. And Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, said in an interview with Bloomberg that this was very concerning. He did not say it was a Sputnik moment, as some other people did, but he described it as very close to that. So it's definitely something that sees is causing concern within the Pentagon and other elements of the U.S. government.
What kind of a technology are they using that is making it so difficult for us to track these? And I mean, is this something brand new that that Russia hadn't been able to utilize in the past?
No, it's not. And I have to be a little careful because we are, in terms of the details, we're going on these Financial Times reports. The Pentagon has not confirmed the details of any of this. Milley described it as a test of a hypersonic weapons system, but he did not say exactly what it was or what was particularly worrying about it, what technology was used. What experts seem to think is that the Chinese are using what is called a fractional orbital bombardment system, which is something that the Soviets had, which is to send a weapon up into space into partial orbit. And then the hypersonic glide vehicle is new, but it's something that the Russians have a hypersonic torpedo. The U.S. is working on this technology. Several smaller countries are working on this technology. So without knowing more details, it's hard to say exactly how advanced this Chinese technology is, but it is concerning in the sense that U.S. missile defenses right now are first of all only semi-effective, but they are also based to intercept missiles coming over the North Pole. With a hypersonic glide vehicle, you could send it down from orbit wherever you want, and so theoretically it could come down over the South Pole and approach the U.S. from that direction, where we have no missile defense coverage. So in that sense, it would be able to evade the limited defenses that we have right now.
In the past, Americans we've seen a history of our president and his Soviet/Russian counterparts having lots of face-to-face negotiations over nuclear weapons. what's the history of the U.S. and China and what might we anticipate kind of going forward?
That's a really important question, and the biggest difference in U.S.-China relations in terms of nuclear issues versus U.S.-Soviet and U.S.-Russian relations, there isn't a history, right? China has not engaged in the kind of official arms control talks or even nuclear dialogues that we have for decades with the Russians and with the Soviets. There were for about 15 years or so ongoing what's called track 1.5 talks, where you have think tank people, experts discussing these issues, and active officials may attend, may possibly speak, but aren't. You don't have sort of U.S. officials sitting down at a table with Chinese officials and negotiating or talking about these things. So we really don't understand each other's mindset, right? With the Russians, we understand their kind of nuclear concepts or doctrines, how they think about using these things, what sort of safeguards they have in place. And we really don't have that sort of understanding with the Chinese. Just to give you one example, at one of these unofficial talks, I think the idea came up from a Chinese participant that in a conflict, naturally the first thing the Chinese would do would be to try and take out our military satellites, right? And I think the Americans pointed out that this would spark fear on the Pentagon's side that they were trying to disable our nuclear command and control, and it could provoke a much more serious response from our side. And I don't think they had anticipated that, again, because we had not had these kinds of talks. The Chinese say, our arsenal is so much smaller than yours. We're not going to discuss arms control unless you either come down to our level or until we build up to yours, right? Which is hard to argue against, but you do need to have discussions.
Not likely to happen. Not likely to happen. Well, we were talking about that. There is a really large disparity, right? We were talking about. You said that currently the Chinese have something in the neighborhood of 200s of warheads. The U.S. is in the mid 3,000s, 3,500. So I think it's national security. It says we're not allowed to know exactly how many we have. But yeah, it is. Why should we be worried that even a few hundred more warheads are going to be disconcerting in terms of what China is doing? What if you go stockpile to stockpile? Obviously, there's the U.S. could inflict a whole lot of damage, but even a small amount of what China is doing could be problematic, right?
Right. It could be very destabilizing, precisely because of this lack of dialogue and understanding that we were just talking about. As you say, the Pentagon estimated the number of operational warheads in the low 200s in 2019. Most experts put the total number at something closer to 350. So even if you doubled or tripled or quadrupled that, you wouldn't get close to what the U.S. has, which is 3,750 warheads. 1,550 of those are deployed under the New START limits. So our arsenal is much bigger. China is not trying to build up an arsenal big enough that they can launch a devastating first strike and wipe out all of our nuclear weapons. They are trying to ensure that they have a capable, resilient second strike ability, so that we don't think that in a conflict we might be able to launch a massive nuclear strike, take out most of their arsenal, and then have our missile defenses intercept whatever is left that they try and fire back at us. So they're trying to ensure that we don't think that we ever have that kind of capability. But it's dangerous for two reasons. One, because it's when everyone's building up like this and you don't understand what the other side is thinking, the chances of a nuclear accident, the chances of a miscalculation, the chances of a conflict escalating in a way that you don't anticipate rises. And it's possible that the chance of a conventional conflict could rise as well. I mean, if China feels perfectly secure in the fact that we could not launch a nuclear attack against them for fear of their retaliation, they might be a little more, I wouldn't say more inclined, but they might feel a little more comfortable if a conflict over, say, Taiwan broke out, that they could keep this at a conventional level, and that at the conventional level, our capabilities, in that particular scenario, are much more evenly matched than they are in the nuclear arena.
I'm glad you brought that up. Over the summer, when everybody was looking at what was going on in Afghanistan, one of the major criticisms launched at the Biden administration was this sense that regardless of the decision on withdrawing or not, the way it was handled, the seeming lack of competence coming from the United States in the evacuation and so forth, was this fear that that China could well be emboldened to move against Taiwan. So with both of those factors, is there any sense from the national security intelligentsia, is the likelihood of that increasing, or is China still sort of kind of taking a wait and see attitude here?
I mean, you'll hear people say that the likelihood is increasing. I'm not sure that I personally buy that. I think Chinese leaders understand that Taiwan is of much greater strategic value to the U.S. than Afghanistan is. I mean, we have many more core interests at stake in maintaining the status quo over Taiwan. And so China cannot be confident that we wouldn't come to Taiwan's aid in the event of a conflict. And they also have to understand that the sort of diplomatic and economic repercussions of them trying to seize Taiwan by force would be massive. And those are very steep costs. They might be willing to pay them if Taiwan declared independence or looked like it was moving in that direction. But I think if you ignore the kind of hyper nationalist rhetoric that you find in China, I don't think that their calculation will have changed at this point. They cannot be confident that they could win a conflict quickly and easily and not pay a massive cost in other arenas. And so unless they're pushed into it, I don't think that they're more likely to go ahead right now. And I don't think that the Afghan withdrawal will affect their calculations one way or the other.
Should Americans be concerned that China's own domestic troubles over the last couple of years could also influence the nuclear buildup? Obviously, COVID started there. There's been residual impact on the Chinese economy. Obviously, you don't see the kind of protests in the street that we would see here in the U.S. But apparently there is kind of mounting unrest there, and could the CCP say, we need to kind of build up and show our military muscularity, just to try and quell the domestic unrest?
Well, I mean, you can argue it both ways. I think on the one hand, China does have very steep economic challenges that they face, and they perfectly and they understand that perfectly well. On the one hand, that might encourage caution because again, the economic repercussions of them blockading or trying to invade Taiwan would be massive. It would really damage the Chinese economy. On the other hand, as you say, it is nationalism is a good distraction. It is a tool they've used in the past to renew or build up support among the populace. And if you're a Chinese leader and you're looking ahead to the medium to long term, these challenges are not going to get easier. They've got demographic challenges, they have economic challenges. There's a sort of growing coalition of countries within Asia and around the world who are resisting the encroachment of Chinese influence. So you may look ahead and say, in 10 years, our options are going to be even more limited than they are right now. And again, I don't think that's going to encourage them to be adventurous, but if they're faced with a situation where they feel like they either need to take Taiwan or lose Taiwan for good, it's probably more likely to happen in the next 10 years than after that. So it is a dangerous period.
Well, as we finish up, as I said, with all this, there's all this talk about of China building up, and doomsday missiles and so forth. What's the U.S. doing from a defensive posture to deal with these challenges?
Well, the U.S. right now is debating exactly how much money to spend on modernizing our own nuclear arsenal, and some of that makes sense, right? I mean, investing in our ballistic missile submarines, in nuclear capable bombers, these second strike weapons are critical to maintaining our deterrent. On the other hand, it's questionable whether we need to invest as much as some want to in ground-based in ICBMs. And we really need to have a debate about how much to spend on missile defenses because, they don't work very well, but they do encourage Russia and China to spend more on weapons like these hypersonic vehicles to try and invade them. And in an offense-defense arms race, offense is much cheaper. So the Chinese will win that if we try and outspend them on our missile defenses.
Great. And that seems like a perfect place to stop. Nisid Hajari, my esteemed colleague, author of our editorial this week, How the U.S. Should Deter China's Nuclear Ambitions. I'm Robert George. Once again, thank you for joining us on Bloomberg Opinion Editorial Board Conversations, and we'll talk to you next week.